What's good, beautiful people? The Black Thumb here, and today we're going to be repotting this orchid in a new potting mix, compliments of my guy Randy from the Black Orchid Project. So let's get into it. All right, so before we get into repotting this orchid, let's run through the supplies we have here on the table and kind of the general supplies you need whenever you are going to repot your orchid. So for us, we'll start with the potting mix or the potting media that we're going to be using, and this is a mixed media that was derived and made completely custom by my friend Randy at the Black Orchid Project. We then have some clean gardening shears just in case we need to do any pruning. We have a little bit of fertilizer here that we'll play around with. We have a big bottle of water to put the fertilizer in so that it dissolves nicely. And then we have the pot that we are actually going to repot this orchid in. So whenever you are thinking about repotting an orchid, there are a couple of general guidelines that I think will help you be successful. Number one, recognize that repotting or uprooting an orchid from its initial home or the home that it's currently in to another or a new home can be very stressful and very nerve-wracking for the plant. So the more gently you can do it and the more consistently you can do it, the better it will be for your orchid overall. And typically, general guidelines are you typically want to repot your orchid every 12 to 24 months, depending on how it's doing, and most importantly, how is the root growth happening, and in particular below the surface, not necessarily above the surface of the pot. So if you're seeing that your orchid is root bound, then that is probably an indicator that you want to repot your orchid relatively soon. The other time where it will feel necessary to repot an orchid is if your orchid is completely overrun by pests and you've made your best efforts and done everything that you could to try to get rid of that pest infestation and it has been unsuccessful. And in those situations, I would go ahead and say repot the orchid, try to hit the reset button with that orchid so that it gives it the best chance to continue to grow and thrive. And then the last thing, or the last consideration that I will say as it relates to repotting, is try not to repot your orchid when your orchid is in bloom, because again, in that first consideration we talked about, repotting your orchid is a very stressful and kind of nerve-wracking activity, sometimes for the people who are doing it, but also for the orchid. And so if you are repotting your orchid while it is flowering, you are definitely running the risk of those flowers dropping a lot sooner than they would have because things are changing and the environment is changing around them more quickly than the orchid can adjust. Now, in that case, like I said again, if the orchid is completely overrun with pests, flowers included, then at that situation, I would think about repotting and maybe even cutting off that flowering spike to save the overall orchid from the pest that is kind of proliferating and hanging on to your orchid at that time. Okay, so now that we've talked about some special considerations around repotting your orchid, let's get into our demonstration where we'll repot this and then do a little fertilizing at the end so that we set this orchid up for some early success, considering this is going to be a stressful process for the orchid a little bit. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and drop one of these caplets here, one of our soul food caplets, into our bottle of water here, and we'll let that dissolve while we kind of do the other things. So let's get this open. Love how easy this is to open, and I love that it's also resealable so that it will definitely help to keep these caplets nice and fresh for the long haul. So the instructions say to do 1 to 2 capsules in 1 gallon of water. This is not quite a gallon of water, so I'm only gonna do 1 of these capsules. Pop the top here. And I kind of want to see if it just like dissolves on its own or if I need to shake it up, so let's find out. So it looks like it might need just a touch of encouragement. So it looks like the capsule is starting to dissolve. So we'll give it another little shake here. All right, and then we'll just kind of put that over there for now. So now the next part is going to be, let's take a look at our root system and let's see if there's anything that we need to get rid of. And so what I love about orchid roots is that they give you lots of great visual feedback on what is actually alive versus what may be dying versus what is already dead. So this is a really great example. So you see this root here is doing well. It's nice and dark green, meaning that it's uptaking that water and the nutrients from that water. This root here is probably on its way to dying out, but still you can feel that it is or you can see that it's a little bit more mushy and squishy, which is typically an indicator that a root is dying. And then we've got an orchid that kind of has a mix of the two, right? So we've got an orchid that feels really good and looks really good here. And then kind of at this end point here, it is sort of dying / rotting off. So we are going to remove all of the parts or all the aspects of the roots that we don't want to bring into the new situation. So it's kind of like shedding baggage in an old situation so that you go into a new situation nice and fresh and are able to start off on the right foot. So that's what we're gonna do now. All right. So again, with your gardening shears, you want to make sure that they're nice and clean. A couple of ways to clean your gardening shears is you can dip them in alcohol, you know, and let them sit for, 5 to 10 minutes or whatnot, and that typically kills a lot of the bacteria. You can also wash your gardening shears with, just dish soap and water, which is kind of what I do. And then we go from there. All right, so now we're gonna start cutting things off here. So this root here, we're gonna take it all the way at the top and snip it right off like that. And then we'll find other little ones that are either showing signs of rot, like this one here. And then we'll take that little piece there that's rotting. And the cool thing is that Randy obviously did a great job of prepping this orchid for me, so there isn't much for me to do as it relates to pruning. But typically when you are repotting an orchid that has been under your care for a number of months or even a year or two, expect that you're gonna do a lot more cleanup and pruning in this situation. So that is the pruning that we're gonna do. And so these are the roots that we're left with. And so now it is about us just basically getting it repotted. So let's get it cracking. All right, so this is the pot that we're gonna repot in. A lot of times before I put the potting media in, I kind of just want to get a feel for like, okay, is it gonna fit? Can I get all of my roots in? If not, what is that gonna look like? And as you can see, this is gonna be basically like a perfect fit here. So it's gonna give us a couple of things. It's gonna give the orchid plenty of room to grow, right? And you typically wanna go 1 to 2 inches up in size whenever you're repotting an orchid. What I love about this pot is it has good drainage at the bottom as well. And it's a custom-made pot. A friend of ours made this pot for me, and so I've been waiting for the right opportunity to repot it and to put a new orchid in there, and here we are. So it's a great experience for all of us today. So we'll go ahead and get our potting media out, right? And really do just kind of want to show you all kind of what it looks like. So this is it. So it's got that sphagnum moss, it's got some perlite rocks, it's got some charcoal, and then some smaller bark pieces there. And again, this is really going to help with help with moisture balance, but also with the airflow. And because this pot here doesn't have air holes that can kind of go through to allow that cross breeze to get through, it's important that the potting media is a balance of a few different things, because that is what will help the orchid to thrive and do just fine. All right, so we're gonna start by just putting a little bit in the bottom there, just to kind of set the base there. And then from there, we're just gonna pour some in around and fill it in. and I like to give it a little shake so that the potting media really settles down in the bottom. And there's a reason why I'm also leaving this a little bit above the surface, because there aren't very many holes here around the sides that will allow that cross breeze to get through. I want to make sure that the base of the plant is somewhat above the surface, because at that point it maximizes the airflow that it can actually achieve and that it can get, which decreases our risk for things like rot and infection. All right, and so we'll finish up a little bit over here, dropping a little bit in there. Okay. And so that is basically how we get it repotted. And then we always want to finish up our repotting, especially if you did not pre-soak your potting media. We always want to refinish that up with some water. So let's see where we're at with our fertilizer. Okay, so now that we have this orchid repotted, we are going to water it in using our fertilized water. Now, as you can see, the capsule is still dissolving, but fertilizer is seeping through and seeping out of that capsule. So I would say in the future, I would probably do this the night before or a day or two before I'm planning to repot, to give it plenty of time to dissolve and be fully ready and fully concentrated of that solution. But again, we're gonna be watering this orchid consistently over time, so there'll be plenty of room for us to continue to fertilize. All right, so let's do it. Water it. I just want to make sure that we're getting all those roots nice and wet, and then we want to make sure that it drains out at the bottom. And then from there, we got our little water collection tray underneath. All right, and just like that, we're all done. So today we covered some considerations on when to repot and why you should be repotting, understanding that repotting is a stressful time for the orchid. So there are some things that you can do to kind of set it up for success, i.e. gently removing it from its pot, removing all of the dead material, and dead roots, dead leaves, those types of things, and then watering it in at the end. And in this case, we use some fertilizer with that water to just try and give it a little bit of an extra bump as it transitions into its new home. Now, one of the things to recognize is that because it's going from a new home, from one home to another, there is going to be this period where you may see diminished growth in the leaves, or you may see some wilting or some droopiness in the leaves. Don't trip, just stay consistent with your care, because these are all things that happen as you transition and as an orchid transitions from one place to another. It's no different than when we move from one place to another. It takes us some time to organize our things. It takes us some time to settle into our new space before we are fully comfortable and able to thrive. And so orchids are no different. So just remember that that is a part of the process as well. So if you have questions about repotting, if you have questions about the potting media, about fertilizing, throw them in the comments. I will address them as best I can and maybe make some new videos as it relates to these types of topics in the future. But with that being said, I hope that helps and your orchids keep blooming.